Awesome. So I think we'll get started, guys, which I think means to pop your headsets on if you haven't already. Great. Thanks for joining us today. I think I'll just wait while a few more people put their headsets on. Cool. So hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca from Snowplow. I head up sales engineering. So I've spent the last 4.5 years at Snowplow helping our customers and prospects solve some of their data challenges.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah. No? Okay. Yeah, now? Maybe? Okay, cool. So I'm Emiel. I'm an analytics engineer at Snowplow. I've been here for about a year. And I'm responsible for the data modeling side of things, building out DBT packages and general data models so our customers can get started quicker and get value quicker from Snowplow data.
Awesome. So today we're going to speak a little bit about purposefully creating data using Snowplow. So we wouldn't be a vendor at an event if we didn't stick a giant kind of quote or statistic up from a vendor like Forbes. But really, like talking about data creation today, 4 in 5 companies do deem AI to be one of their top business priorities. I'm sure one of the reasons lots of you are here learning things at Big Data London is around supporting your data strategy. However, another statistic, the last one, I promise, I think, if I remember what's on the rest of the slides. But yeah, 87% of data science projects never make it to production. And I'm sure this is a challenge that resonates, again, with a bunch of people here in the room and here at this event. And really, like, data is the heart of that reason why those projects don't make it to production. So specifically, maybe poor data quality, challenges with like extracting data from systems, fixing it, making it fit for purpose, challenges with even having the data available that you need to answer the specific business problems or challenges that your organization are having. The lack of data readiness, so really like how much effort, time, additional tooling, systems, processing is required before that data is actually ready to be fit for purpose to deliver the project that you're working on. The whole area of data governance, I mean, there's a whole theatre here named after it, but like what can the data be used for? How was it collected? How was it gathered? Is it compliant? Can it be used to solve this specific challenge? And I guess the organizational levels of data literacy and like the understanding of what that data means, and again, like how that can be interpreted and used. So I guess I put to you that one of the reasons that AI projects, data science projects struggle is actually because in organizations, we have this concept of making do with the data that you have available. And that can be in like a range of different ways. It can be in data silos, transactional systems, on-premise data warehouses, like a bunch of different places. Like these are just kind of illustrative destinations of where we work with customers and prospects who are gathering data from. Also like other like vendors as well, etc. Like none of these logos on the left like exist to create data that is like nicely structured for the data warehouse and designed to meet data science, analytical, AI, BI use cases. And I think, again, probably, I promise you a last statistic, but one more kind of snuck in there. That 80% of time, really like overworking with data scientists, people running AI projects, analysts for years, really like probably 80%, I think, is an underestimate of what that workload looks like, about reverse engineering the logic, finding gaps in the data, thinking about how you can correct that data. And fundamentally, this is an approach that we have all become accustomed to, right? Like you start a project and it's like, okay, well, what data do I have available? Like what exists already? And like then really understanding what that workload might look like to actually make it fit for purpose. And so like the downside of that, and I mean, I don't really even know if it is 20% of the time, if I think back to when I was an analyst before Snowplow, but 20% of the time or less, you're actually doing the work that's going to generate that business value, that's going to drive an outcome. And like that's a challenge. And so at Snowplow, we speak a lot about behavioral data, and I think it's useful to define what we mean by that a little bit and kind of talk about that. And it's not just having like that transactional signal of exactly what happened. It's understanding what happened, if it's with a customer or something, like who it happened to, where that interaction took place, and then the kind of explanatory like levers that happen before and after that thing that explain why it might happen. And so really like behavioral data is this idea of creating this really rich data set that allows you to really understand all of those things and help you actually better explain and predict as well how customers might react in the future. And I'm just about to hand over to Emiel to get to the interesting analytical bit, but I think I won't dwell too long on this. And there was actually a bonkers moment where I thought about doing a live demo here, and then I realized that that was a terrible idea. So if anyone wants a specific demo of this bit, we've got a stand. We'll put the number up at the end. But I think a thing that I find really interesting when I'm speaking to people that use Snowplow and people that don't use Snowplow that use other tools is this idea of whether it's front-end engineers or like data producers in general, kind of limiting the data that data consumers have available because of time, because of effort, because they've convinced them it's too hard, it's too challenging, we don't want to re-implement, we don't want to do these things. And I guess what I'm here to say is like, it doesn't have to be hard. It's not hard. Like whether it's Snowplow, there's a bunch of tooling and vendors as well in the space that have tried to make that front-end experience simple, make it easy. But really, like, if there's one thing I want you guys to take is, challenge those data producers if they say it's too complicated, it's too challenging, because really creating data that is fit for purpose is going to like elevate and actually hopefully give those projects a greater chance of success. But yeah. Emiel, for an example.
Cool, thank you. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, great, thanks. So let's start with an example. So for Snowplow, typically we do a lot of data generation, data creation, data tracking on websites and on mobile apps. I mean, you can also do this on server-side applications or general, just any kind of event you can create. But for the sake of an example, let's go with the website, and this is the Snowplow website. So let's imagine you have a user or consumer who ends up clicking this button to read an article. What is the data that's actually created from that? And so, like at Snowplow, basically, we generate these events that have a bunch of default fields in them. So you'll have things like a user ID, a timestamp for when that button was actually clicked, when it ended up being loaded into your warehouse, and a couple other steps in between. But you'll have additional context like the page URL, what was kind of the marketing campaign that we attributed to this user getting onto your website, what device, what city, what location. All these kinds of things you have as like default enrichments in the data that's being generated and that's being tracked on your website or on your app. But then on top of that, you can build out these custom entities, these custom contexts that give you a little bit more information around, well, specifically what you want to know. So in our example here, someone clicked on an article. You can put that under a custom button click event where they clicked on, or you can even call it a link click if you want, doesn't really matter. And inside that entity, you can put whatever fields you want to populate. So you can have, for example, the content title, the author, when that content was created, what the ID was, maybe what the number in the kind of carousel of articles was. So you can do this with something like a blog where you have a bunch of different posts, but you could imagine the same thing on an e-com website where you'll have, related products list, and you're looking into, okay, they clicked on the third related product and that was shown this far down on the page. All those kinds of context around what the user actually did and how they did it. That's all that can be baked into Snowplow as a product. So it's very flexible in that sense. And what's interesting about Snowplow, especially from more of like a data analyst side, is that data can actually evolve over time. So we don't have to focus like too much on all of the nitty-gritty around this. It looks more complicated than it is, I promise. But basically, you end up with this kind of schema object, which is this entity that we talked about. So that would be like the button click, and it has a certain versioning, which sometimes gets drilled through to the data warehouse and sometimes doesn't. And then inside that, it has properties. So this button might just have a type, and the type is going to be either string or null, so it can be, well, it's an optional field basically. But in that you can have, I mean, we'll see the data in a sec, but it could be like article opened, or you could have a checkout button, or you could have a delete from cart button. Like, you can fill this field with whatever you want. But what's most interesting is that you can evolve that field over time, and you can evolve that entity over time. So if 2 weeks down the line or a month down the line you decide that you want to add extra properties to this event, to this context, you can do that. And all we do is end up incrementing the version number and then adding a new field. So you can see we still have in the button object, we still have the type field, which is string null, but we also have an index, which is string null, right? So again, we can talk about what number the blog was in that kind of list of related blogs or whatever you want. And that's quite a simple example, but basically what's really cool about that is that you can infinitely extend the properties you need. So if you as a data scientist or a data analyst are analyzing certain information, but then you realize, oh, it would actually be super interesting if I added this field, or I really am missing some crucial piece of information, it's not hard for your front-end engineers to add that in to the tracking code. And then it's not that hard for you as a data analyst or a data scientist to pull that out. And how can I say it's not that hard? So this is kind of what we end up with when how the data looks. So inside your data warehouse, like this will be a Snowflake, but it doesn't really matter if it's Snowflake or Databricks or Redshift or BigQuery or whatever else. You'll have a specific event, which is a button click or a click. And inside that, we have the button, which was the type string, which has the field open article, which is great. So that same event still exists here, but if we increment the schema and if we add new information or new context to that entity, you can see now in the next button click that happens after we've implemented this new tracking, we have the button, which is still called open article, so it's the same button, but now we can see the index is 2. Now this shouldn't really blow your mind, right? Like this isn't an amazing example of like what you can do, but hopefully this gives you an idea that can easily be modeled into whatever all of you do, to basically show you that there's a lot of value to this. And obviously, as an analyst, what you can do is you can still, you can still access this context, which is just a column in our database. You can still access the button field, but if you want to, when it starts to exist, you can very easily extend that to include index or any other kind of property. And this is this event name field is one of 130 different default fields that we have, but you can add as many custom enrichments and therefore custom fields as you want. And so in Snowflake, as an example, all this data will continue to land in exactly the same column, and we just extend basically the JSON object and add more properties to that. So any other custom context or any other entity that you create will just be added as an extra column in your data warehouse. But structured data alone doesn't yield insights, right? So there's, especially when we're talking about web data, there's a lot of other problems that happen as a result of getting a bunch of clickstream data. So sessionization of users is super difficult, right? When you have cookie consents and people can accept them and then reject them later and all these different things that are happening, it's quite hard to be able to track, okay, but this session started at this point, ended at that point, and these are all the kind of places that a person visited in between. These are all the actions that they took over time. Snowplow helps kind of make that a lot easier with some of our data models and some of the work that my team, the analytics engineering team, does to basically wrap all that raw clickstream event data into page views, sessions, and users. And similarly, we have that tracking users across different devices over different times, over different sessions is quite difficult or can be very difficult. If a user, logs into your website today and then tomorrow shows up as a non-logged in user, it's really hard to be able to stitch together whether that session from today is from the same user as yesterday, all that kind of stuff. And Snowplow lets you handle that, quite well. I don't want to go too much into the details, also conscious of time, but there's really a lot we can do there, which will help you with user stitching, and that's kind of a functionality that we have, again, baked into the data modeling, the data tracking and the data modeling. And then lastly, we have the evolution of schemas. So as I just showed you in the last slide, it's not hard to add a new property or a new property to a certain entity, and that just naturally evolves with all the kind of back end side of things that Snowplow handles for you. And what that means is that when we want to add new properties to an entity or do whatever else, we're not ending up with our data models breaking down down the line. I don't know, what you guys' experience is, but mine as a data analyst has been if another data producer has added some different fields into my data, into the data that I'm then modeling, quite often that can end up breaking all my data models for a couple of days, and it's only until some other stakeholder raises a flag and says, hey, this dashboard isn't really working anymore and I have no idea why, that I then get into the crux of, oh, okay, that's because we changed the tracking here and we did this and this and this. And look, that's not an insurmountable problem, right? Like, we can all fix dashboards, but the problem that kind of generates is that it generates kind of a lack of data trust. And the more and more that these things happen, the less and less your actual end data consumers will end up being able to trust the dashboards that you make, the metrics that you show, and then that kind of removes you a little bit further from that data-driven culture that I think a lot of us are hopefully striving towards or are already at. So at Snowplow, modeling isn't an afterthought, and I'm glad it isn't, because I'm in the modeling team. But we built some packages in DBT and in our own kind of older version of DBT called SQL Runner. And again, like let's take web data as an example. What we can do is we can process clickstream data from all these raw events that are being created to basically build up into views of page views, sessions, and users. And what that means is you might no longer be dealing with 4 billion rows of raw event data per day, but instead you're looking at, I don't know, a couple million page views, and then a couple 100,000 sessions, and then maybe 10 thousands of users. And what that means is it's a lot more manageable to gain insights from that. As much as we are fans of data creation and we want you to create a lot of data, if you're talking about the scale of billions of new data points per day, that's fantastic, but it's also kind of really hard as an analyst or as a data scientist to know what to do with that, right? So we built these data models that are still flexible and allow you to kind of customize them how you want and add new properties or change kind of the underlying business logic. But if you don't want that, or if you just want the kind of base, you can just implement them straight away, and you don't have to worry about, again, the sessionization, the user stitching, all those kinds of things. That's kind of baked into the data models, which is really, really cool. And similarly, if we're talking about, again, the schema evolution, which if you do that in a Snowplow manner, right? So you increment the schema version, you add a bunch of new fields. Our data models kind of handle that very well and can make sure that that new data is also showing up in your data warehouse alongside the older data, and it doesn't end up breaking anything, which is hopefully what we all want. And so if you have that again makes sure that there is data trust, and that when changes happen in upstream sources, that downstream things don't end up breaking as a result of all that. So hopefully that's all good news. Basically, what we end up getting is a bunch of clean, structured data that's always going to be available in your warehouse, right? So we're always piping in new data, and if you're modeling it as well on a regular cadence, then you're always getting this clean data that you or your analytics team or your data consumers in general can start to take advantage of, which is really great. And it's always going to contain the newest, latest, and greatest from your tracking. So all the new fields that you've added, as you mentioned before, they'll show up in there as well, which is fantastic. Similarly, this is kind of more generic than just Snowplow, but because the way Snowplow does it as well, if we handle the business logic kind of in these transformations and in these data packages, then we don't have to worry about doing that all in your BI tool. And so business logic can be kind of defined in one place at one time, and there's not going to be all these discussions about what the different definitions are of certain metrics, and I found something else in this dashboard and you have something else. We're kind of, taking that one step back so we can unify data definitions, and also what my colleague was talking about with regards to data literacy. We can all be agreed on what it means to have this metric, to have this this visualization, this dashboard, and then we can all be aligned. And again, that data trust really starts to grow, and your company becomes a little bit more data driven. And then kind of lastly, because you don't have to worry about all these different data cleaning problems, data unification problems, because everything's in the same format and it's extensible, you as a data scientist or even as a data analyst can spend a lot less time trying to normalize the data, trying to declutter the data, trying to make sure that all the fields are actually populated and are populated with the kinds of things you want them to be populated with. So you basically don't have to worry about any of the data mess and can hopefully spend more of your time so that instead of that 20% that Rebecca was talking about, it's closer to, well, but hopefully it's flipped. And it's closer to 80% of the time spending on the actual value-adding kinds of things for your company and also for yourself, things that are more interesting to you. And then, like Rebecca said, hopefully more than 13% of your data science projects end up succeeding instead of what's currently happening. And I'll pass it over to Rebecca to finish off.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think Emiel just did a really good job there of explaining the kind of, I guess, the technical elements of this and the impact to the teams that are working with the data. But I guess, a lot of us here and a lot of the people I speak to, we have to make the business case and justify the value to the business, whether it's for new tooling, whether it's for new hires, whether it's for expanding the team. So I guess just to drive back, it isn't just that you're getting those AI projects to production, maybe more quickly or on time, but just a bunch less time wasted fixing data pipelines. And maybe some of that's in the data team, maybe that's in DevOps, maybe that's across the organization. But that in and of itself is a pretty big dollar amount if you think about the cost of headcount in some of these teams. As Emiel said, it's not just us in data teams and data functions that need to trust the data. Actually, I think one of the most damaging things that can happen with data functions and data teams is when the organization does lose that trust, when you have marketing with one number and product with another number. And suddenly, I think fundamentally the belief in any of the KPIs can erode away quite quickly. And that's a really challenging position to be in a data team. So yeah, hopefully you have a bunch of happy business users who are looking at their dashboard, none the wiser about this awesome data creation journey you've been on to power them. But again, feeling like they have trust and they have the dashboards. And when they want new things added to it, when they want new attributes, when they want the report cut in a new way, there's an easy and flexible way to do that and to get that data kind of available. And then, yeah, hopefully, like Emiel said, those projects are making it to production, or at least the data quality, data availability is not the constraint that's stopping it. We know that there's a bunch of other organizational challenges as well, which can lead to some of these things. So yeah, that's pretty much all from us now. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. If you want to learn more, if you want to see some more about the product, if you want to chat with either of us about anything, we're at booth 330, which is
over there.
That way, I think is the best description I can give. But yeah, we have time for some questions now if anybody would like to ask one. Maybe give the lady at the back a wave if so.